Severance agreements are not just about severance pay. In fact, there's a lot you're giving up, including things that might impact your next job. Hey everyone, it's Acacia, the CEO legal coach. Today we are here talking about severance agreements. And when you're laid off, believe it or not, your employer is likely going to take a lot of action in that agreement to limit where, how fast, what you can do in your next job. Right? They're laying you off, and yet they're saying, by the way, you also can't just go get any new job. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How does this impact things? What does that mean for you? And I always do, if you're not familiar with me or how the Aligned Business Series goes, which is when I go live 3 times a week, that I always have a live Q&A. So please add your comments, please add your questions into the chat. We will get to them at the end once we get through all of the core content, okay? And I always try to keep these under 30 minutes, but with questions, sometimes we go long. Okay, so let's dive in for a second. What does it even mean when we have a severance agreement, and how does it impact your job? So the severance agreement that you have in front of you, your employer is offering you severance, which is really nice and, let's be honest, really shiny and distracting when you're losing your paycheck. When you've just been told you're laid off, like, money suddenly becomes a different type of worry. Maybe you were worried about it before, maybe you weren't, but now you definitely are thinking about it in a way you hadn't been. And you want to get the next paycheck lined up or start that business. Use this to get yourself onto your future. But as we're going to see here, I've got about 5 different areas where your severance agreement might limit your next job. And then we're going to go over 2 more where it's going to limit the pay you get. Believe it or not, that severance pay may not all be yours. And it might even come down to whether you get employed. It's horrible, right? But then also something else that you can ask for to help you in your new job. All right, so a lot to get through. First and foremost, what is the very first section on a severance agreement that is going to be your number one limiter in getting another job? It's called a non-compete. A non-compete clause stops you from working for a competitor, people in your industry. It could be very, very broad. It could be just, hey, you can't work anywhere in 200 miles. And it's like, anywhere? Like, what? Versus sometimes it's just you can't work for our competitors, or you can't work with our clients or vendors or our competitors. So how your non-compete is worded is really, really important, because you want to know what that scope is. You don't want to go apply for a job and then be told you can't work there. You have a contractual agreement not to. It sucks. Or worse, they sue you for it, but more likely they're going to come and tell you can't do that. And you're like, but wait, I needed a job. It's really important to understand 99% of severance agreements are going to have some type of non-compete. It's also very likely that you've already signed some type of non-compete back when you signed your offer letter. Your offer letter is when your current employer, the one that's letting you go, when they gave you the job you have. When they gave you this job, said, hey, here's your salary, here's how things are going to go. Some of those other words on the page were very likely a non-compete back then as well. So know that there are likely layers to it, and this is how that's going to go. So the non-compete limits where and how quickly you can get a job. And I have seen non-competes. They're usually 6 months to 2 years. 6 months to 2 years. And sometimes they're limited to just you can't start the job. Others are you can't apply. Imagine not being able to apply for a job in your industry for 2 years. What are you supposed to do? The FTC tried to ban non-competes across the board last year, and that got overturned in court, which is a real bummer, because I do think there's a certain level of employee where it would be beneficial to, if they're laying you off, just go get it, let these people get a job. But anyways, it got overturned. So now non-competes are state by state. Some states, almost anything on that paper, your employer is able to do. Like I said, they could prevent you from getting any job in 200 miles for 2 years. What are you supposed to do? Relocate? So being mindful of what's on the paper, where in other states, it must be limited to direct competitors or very limited in time, things like that align more to your job, right? If you have a job that had a lot of sensitive information, the business plans for the next 2 years, well, that would have a little bit more limitation on when and where you can go versus somebody who was just like, I was just selling like their basic product. Like, I don't know what's happening with the company at the executive level. So these types of things, okay? Now, one thing I like to always recommend is that when you have a non-compete, get it clarified the way you need it clarified. Get it clarified the way you need it clarified. Just the way they put it on the paper does not mean you have to accept it that way. By the way, you never have to sign a severance agreement, completely optional to sign it. But if you don't sign it, you don't get the money. But one of the things I always recommend in this non-compete is get it articulated, not just in what is and isn't allowed, but the actual companies you're not allowed to go to. Because hear me out on this. If you can get them to say, I don't want you to go to these 5 competitors, now you know they can't come back later and be like, oh, so-and-so is now a competitor. You're not allowed to go to them. You'd be like, no, you said these 5. I didn't go to these 5. Another thing is what types of roles or situations. I used to work with Fortune 500s. Fortune 500s have like 5 different divisions. I only worked in one division. I have no idea what the hell goes on in the other 4. And I'm definitely not going to be working to undermine them because I don't know what's going on in them. So if I go to a competitor of a Fortune 500, well, that could be almost anybody in a number of areas. So I would get it limited to, you can't go work in this specific division for these competitors. See how that's different? And then saying you can't go to any, because there are some industries where it's just large businesses that it's been around, companies have acquired and merged and things like that over the years. And so you're limited to these specific, like what you can and cannot do. So when they just list the whole Fortune 500, well, that's broader than what is necessary. So get these types of clarifications. And then how it helps you is, let's say 3 months down the line, somebody that wasn't a competitor before, but is now, suddenly is the place you can go work at. Suddenly is the place you can go work at. Or you can work at their competitors, but in other divisions, other types of rules. And then when your non-compete is up, then you can move directly to compete with them. See how this helps you open more doors that would be closed if you have a general non-compete on your agreement. But know that a severance agreement 99% of the time will have a non-compete in it. It's probably enforcing or expanding the non-compete you signed on your offer agreement. So the next way, I know there's going to be some questions about that. Go ahead and get those questions into the chat, guys. Don't worry, I will get to your questions. I promise. Okay. The next one where things can start to affect you is a non-disclosure. Non-disclosure agreement, sometimes called an NDA, might just be in there as a non-disclosure paragraph. Why this matters for your next job is one of the biggest things that I see happen is that when you have a non-disclosure on the paper, it says that you promise to keep the company's information secret. You promise not to use it. You promise not to share it, which means sometimes the knowledge and experience you've acquired over your career technically belongs to somebody else. But you're going to go on in your career and do what you do best. Share what you do best. Share what you know, your experience. So sometimes sharing that or using that is in violation. And when I had a family member, this happened to a family member, so this is a real personal story, is he had worked for this company for, I don't remember how long, like a decade or something. And he ended up over that time creating a customized software program for them. So as the company grew and changed, he was the one in the back end building and creating this thing. So when they let him go, he's like, I'm going to go create my own company, my own consulting firm, and use, I already know how to build this product. I don't need their product. They can have theirs, but I know the back end code and I can create my own version and customize this for others. Nope. He was not allowed to use that information because he worked for an employer, gave it to the employer, and because it was created within his employment, that intellectual property belonged to his employer, even though he's the one who created it from scratch. He's the one who was the brains behind the whole thing. They ended up creating a whole department around him and its knowledge, and he didn't get to take any of it with him in his future because he had signed away. When usually on an offer letter, you sign saying, hey, yeah, anything that I create and do in this job belongs to my employer. This happened to another family member. His name was on a lot of patents. But those patents were created under his employment umbrella. And so his employer's name is also on those patents. And because they were created under the employment umbrella, he can't go use those own patents on his own stuff, even though his name's on them in the USPTO. They happened under his employment. They belong to the employer. So non-disclosure can go beyond just sharing insider info type of a thing. It comes down to the intellectual property and what your role is, what you created while you were there. You can't take that with you to a new employer. You can't take it with you to your new company unless you get permission to. Okay, so this is why we want to look at the non-disclosure on your severance agreement, because that type of expertise, knowledge, and experience might be capped or limited when you go to whatever you do next. So you want to check out the non-disclosure, like I said, confidentiality there. The next one that happens on a severance agreement is the non-solicitation, which, by the way, guys, I realize I didn't put this up. I have a whole program where I put everything I know about severance agreements into different modules, pay modules, insurance modules. Your next role is a whole module where it's got the videos, it's got checklists, it's got guides, all that in there. So if you need more details about any of this, know that I have that there, okay? That is available to you. So don't feel like you have to rush taking notes, but there's a whole program where I really, really deep dive into this. So, okay, so we were talking about non-solicitation here for a sec. Non-solicitation. It's a rule that stops you from recruiting the people, right? We just talked about you can't take certain ideas and IP and things like that. Well, now you can't take the relationships. Now, some non-solicitation clauses will be like, okay, well, you can't take our clients with you. Well, that kind of makes sense. It's not fair that because you got let go, you get to take the company's clients with you. But sometimes it also says you can't use your relationships with our clients or with our vendors or with any of our staff to get your next job. You can't use your relationships with any of them to build a new company. You can't use any of that. You definitely can't poach them from us. You can't encourage them to leave us. So that's non-solicitation. It's about protecting the employer's relationships and the ones that you gained access to and got to use because you were employed by them, because now you're not employed by them. Okay, so that's non-solicitation. Rehirability. This is a big one. This is a big one. Oftentimes when we leave a company, when we're being laid off, it might just be because there's a cash flow shortage or something's going on in the economy or the industry. And they're like, yeah, we want to hire you back. 8 out of 10 severance agreements will not allow you to be hired back. It's called rehirability, but that's probably not the word it's under. It's usually just a random sentence, and it could be anywhere on the document, okay? And what it is a sentence or clause that says whether or not you can work for that company again. And like I said, 8 out of 10 times the answer will be no, and you have contractually agreed to this. And it's going to be on file with HR. So you're not allowed to ever come back to this company in any form or fashion. Not even 20 years down the road in a whole different division. You have contractually said, I will never work for you again. But they can sometimes go further. I recently saw one where it wasn't just you can't work for us. You can't work for our partners or our affiliates ever. We don't even know what affiliates is right now, let alone what it will be in 20 years. What do they end up taking over the entire industry? Think of some of the big like Fortune 100 companies. How many smaller brands and smaller pieces do they have to them? You might be saying, I will never work for you again. I will never apply to you again. And if I do, I'm in breach of contract. They could fire you the second it happens or they realize it. That sucks. So it's really important. Like I said, 9 out of 10 severance agreements will have this in there. 8 out of 10 will say you're not allowed to return. So if that is something that you're anticipating, if that is a conversation you've had with HR, your boss, your team members, make sure that clause, that statement is clarified or removed so you're not prohibited from coming back, okay? That's really important if you have any intents of being hired back on in the near future. The next clause, I know we're still going. We're on this is the last clause, and then we're gonna go over 2 things about money and ways that you can get support in your severance agreement. Yes. So this one is called non-disparagement. This one, again, that word, it's called a non-disparagement, but you're never gonna see that phrase on the document. I don't know why we give things names and then never use them. But what it is somewhere in your document, you're going to find a clause that says whether or not you or the other side can say anything bad about each other. 9 out of 10 times, it's going to prohibit you from saying anything about them, but it's not going to prohibit them from saying anything about you. So it's an area that we can negotiate. Why this matters. You might need them as a reference someday, right? Hey, your next job might be like, we want to check your last 3 employers. write them down, and then what are they going to say? When your future employer calls them and says, I want to verify their employment with you, what is going to be said about you? Yeah, we let them go. Their last day was September 15th. That doesn't sound too pretty, even though it is what happened. So we want to clarify what they can say about you, and they're definitely going to want to clarify what you can say about them, right? You don't get to go to the press and be like, they were shitty, they did this, they did that. They don't want their reputation ruined, which is why you're going to see it in the majority of severance clauses. Agreements. But if you see it, I want you to go back and make sure it's mutual. I want you to make sure it's mutual. And I want to make sure you get the references you need out of these people, because it is not your fault you're being laid off, and you should not be punished in the future moving forward because of what they have decided to do. And so that's really important to make sure that is mutual. It's a mutual thing. So, all right, we've gone through the main clauses. Don't forget to get your questions into the chat, because I'm about to get to all of those, okay? And let me see. Now we want to talk about the two things that really matter when it comes to, first is the money, okay? In exchange for you giving up usually a lot of rights, far more than we've even talked about. We've already talked about, 5-6 ways that severance agreement can limit you getting your next job. And that's not all they're asking you to waive. This is just one of 4 areas. But what they're going to do is give you money for that, right? That's what your severance payment is they're paying you to give up your rights. You think they're paying you as a gift or for your service. No. 10, 20 years ago, yeah, that's what severance payment was. It was a thank you. It said, oh, sorry, we're letting you go. Now it's a business exchange. And so what ends up happening is that once you have found your next job, usually you will find a clause in your severance agreement that says you now have to tell the people who just laid you off. And if there's any severance payments left coming to you, any benefits, they're now extinguished. So let's say you get 2 months of severance, but you find a job in a month, you don't get that extra month. And you have contractually said you're going to do this. So you're in breach of contract if you don't. So it's really important to know if your severance agreement has anything that is about whether or not you're going to have to tell them, and if it cuts off your payments. Whether or not you have to tell them, and if it cuts off your payments. Okay. So one way to get around the payments, we've talked about some other things about getting around your non-competes, is get more money up front. Get more money up front. Oh, get it in a lump sum. Hey, instead of it going 2 months, just give me a 2-month lump sum up front. That way, when you start your job on week 2, you're not going to lose anything. You still get the value. So understanding how the value of the money is versus the dates of when you start your next job. I also, this is something I didn't mention. When let's say you have a non-compete that's 6 months. Let's say you're not allowed to apply for jobs in your area for 6 months, but your severance package is for 2 months. Well, what's supposed to happen those other 4 months? That's not a fair value exchange. So remember, you are giving up something in exchange for that money. Let's make sure you get money worth what you're giving up. So either you want to give up less or you want to get more money, right? That's that. There is not a law that says how much money you can get other than the laws that say, well, I'm not aware of a law. Let's put it that way. I am not aware of a federal law, and there's not a state law where I am licensed. So check. This is one thing. Everything is state by state when it comes to severance agreements. Everything is state by state. So double check. But off the top of my head right now, where I'm licensed and in my experience, I am not aware of a cap in the amount of money you can get for your severance other than the one regarding pension plans. What makes a severance payment different than a pension plan is that pension plans are intended to be retirement benefits, but is the amount. So your severance is not allowed to go more than double what you made last year. Then it becomes a pension, which is a different situation, which gets taxed differently, everything. So that's the only one I know of. Right? There might be others, but that's the only one I know of. So generally speaking, though, back to what we were saying, though, if they're going to pay you for 2 months, but you're not allowed to apply for 6 months, well, you're going to need at least 7 or 8 months, because by the time you can apply, you still need time to get the jobs. So making sure there's that fair value exchange in every single element that you're giving up and what you're getting. And then the other thing that is negotiable that most people don't realize, and it all comes down to who you are, what you might need, is sometimes, especially for bigger companies, they'll pay a recruiter, or they'll pay to get resume services, or they'll pay to help you set you up for success to get the next job. Okay. Because they would end up having to do their unemployment insurance and all these other things. So it's something you can negotiate in sometimes is, hey, you're the one laying me off. I want help getting my next job. And if I have to hire a recruiter because of the type of industry we're in, I want you to pay for that. So just know that that is something that you can do. That is something that you can negotiate in. All right, are we ready? I see the questions. Oh gosh, this is a long list of questions. Okay, we've got we have 9 minutes to get through all these questions. Oh my gosh. Okay. How do I know if I even have a non-compete? Okay, 99.99% of the time, it's going to be in your severance agreement and or your offer letter. Right? You may have already signed one. So first off, go look at your offer letter. If you don't have your offer letter, ask HR for it because you want to be fully aware of it. But they're almost always going to put some limitation on where you can go and how fast you can go there. Almost always. I've never seen a severance agreement that hasn't had one, but I don't want to say 100% of them just in case there's that one out there that didn't have it because it was written by somebody who didn't know what they were doing or ChatGPT did it or something. But you're almost always going to have one. So the key is it may not have those words. It may not have the words non-compete. It may just simply start to say employee promises not to go to any of the following places for the next 6 months, or you're not going to apply. Look for words like apply, hire, competitor, competitors, vendor, suppliers. Anything that they might look to generally, it's usually in general words, and they use general words because they can interpret them how they want. It's another reason why you definitely want specifics in your severance agreements, why I recommend having the list. If you're really uncertain, you can ask, but the hesitation I have about having you ask them is, one, asking them doesn't mean it's not in the agreement or vice versa. What they clarified doesn't, if your agreement says you can't go to anybody for 6 months, but then what they say is, well, what we really mean is, well, you can't go to our competitors for 6 months. If that email that you got from them isn't explicitly listed in your agreement, it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. So it's a little bit dangerous. And also, what if you were the 1% that didn't have one in there and now you open the door? So I would prefer you search for the types of words, skim it, scan it. It's very likely to be in there. Okay. If my non-compete is too broad, is it enforceable? Oh, this is a great question. Okay. So I think I mentioned that the FTC tried to ban non-competes in general last year. Try to waive them across the board, except for certain types of positions or roles, because they can be so predatory and overly inclusive. Like I said, they can prevent you from getting any job anywhere in 200 miles for 2 years. What? But it is important to know that non-compete laws vary state to state. Every single state has different laws. Some states let almost anything go by. Like the one I just said, 200 miles. But other states are very specific. Like it must be related to your specific job, must be the employer has to demonstrate that it would harm them. The time must be limited. The geographical situation must be limited and things like that. I think California, I'm not licensed in California, but my understanding is they're pretty narrow in what is even allowed. But here's the thing. It is better to negotiate the non-compete than to sign an illegal one. Why? Because you don't know yet, unless you go to a lawyer, that it is in fact illegal. And I have seen this where people are like, oh, I can tell it's illegal, so I just went and violated it. Well, you're still in violation of a contract. You're still breaching a contract. And so now you still have to go through all of that. Your employer can still come sue you, enforce it, cease and desist, all of those things. But also, they're going to tell your new employer. And your new employer is going to want nothing to do with that. So they might just drop you just to avoid being involved in the lawsuit, whether or not the non-compete was legal. The new employer may not hang around the year or two to get through litigation to find out. So it's best never to sign one that you think is illegal to begin with. If you have any concerns about that, please find an employment lawyer in your state. I cannot enforce that enough. So much information online is general. So I don't want you following, Utah, a blog out of Utah if you're in Florida, right? I want you to make sure that you know that those are very, very different. What's the difference between a non-compete and a non-solicit? Sure. Yeah, non-compete. You can't go to competitors. You can't do anything that's going to compete with their vendor relationships, with their supplier relationships, with their client relationships, that competes with their products. So the compete element, right? You can't build a business that does things like that. Now, compete is generally vaguely interpreted. So like I said, my family member, that the software, he's not competing with them. That company doesn't even sell software. That's not what they did. But he had created software within his employment there. And so they were like, you cannot have your company that does this. Where a non-solicit is from solicitation, it's about the relationships. So it's one thing to not compete with them on paper or product or services. It's another to utilize the relationships. You can't use the relationships with our vendors. You can't use the relationships with our clients. You can't use the relationships that you have internally. So solicitation is about the people and the relationships. Not compete is about the product, services, and what's going on, like what brings in the money. So two totally different things there. And that's kind of the way to remember them. Compete is about competing with them, and solicit is about the relationships. If I remember information in my head, does an NDA still apply? Majority of the time, yes. You don't have to physically steal the papers. You don't have to sneak them in your briefcase out the door. You don't have to download those files onto your hard drive or into the cloud. In fact, please never do any of that. But that's not what it means to steal. Because ideas themselves, the processes, hey, back at so-and-so company, instead of doing this, this, and this, they did it this way. That's insider info that you've got because you work there. That might be a trade secret you just shared. Because if that process impacts their money, impacts how they do business, impacts their competitive advantage, it's likely a trade secret, right? And so that type of stuff right there can be a violation of a non-disclosure agreement. Yeah, many violations of non-disclosure agreements are not intentional. Most people are trying to be good people. You're probably a very good person. I trust that you are. So it doesn't end up being intentional stealing. Intent is not part of a non-disclosure. It's simply saying you're not going to use that information or share that information. No bearing on whether you intended to or not. Complete accident still counts. Yeah. Why would a company ban me from being rehired? Great question. A few reasons, but the number one reason is retaliation. People can hold a grudge for a really long time. So let's say you get hired back 2 years later, you go inside there and you ruin things from the inside. You release stuff to WikiLeaks. And we've seen these types of things, right? That retaliation from the inside, that harm, that's usually why. They also don't want you to have an idea of a lawsuit, come back in, get the information for the lawsuit. Those types of things. So whenever they put something into your severance agreement that you're waiving or giving up, it's to protect them. There's something that's protecting them. Yeah, that's the retaliation is the number one reason, I think. Does the no rehire apply to subsidiaries too? 50-50. 50-50. The rehire ability thing, like, can they hire you back? Check. I have seen simply, you promise not to apply or work for this company again. But then, like I said, I've seen ones where it's like, you can't go to our subsidiaries or affiliates, anything in the family. And what's difficult about these is what's in the affiliates, the subsidiaries, the family now might be different in 5, 10, 20 years. So that type of information is good to know. So just look at the words. It's usually a very simple sentence. It could just be a few words in that sentence, but it might be packed into a paragraph somewhere else on the paper. But double check what it includes, because they are all different. Can I post on LinkedIn that I was part of layoffs? Look at the documents. Look on the documents. If you're saying if they haven't made layoffs public, you're disclosing behind the scenes information. If you're seeing anything about bad, like they're a bad company, they do this. Yeah. So it can kind of come to the idea of the general information that they've released, right? We know that Oracle, ConocoPhillips, I think some of the casinos here in Vegas, some other things, they announced their layoffs. So saying that you're part of that, you're not violating anything. But if you say something bad in that, something negative about the employer, ConocoPhillips, I don't even want to use a word, a name, company A, B, and C laid off their best employees. I cannot believe they did. Now you're letting that emotional fuse into it. That's where we start to get into that non-disparagement, harassing, saying the wrong things type of thing, okay? So be mindful of that, because what you post on that internet can be seen, can be picked up in the media, anything like that goes back to them. But if you haven't signed, away that right. If you don't sign your severance agreement, unless it's in your offer letter or something else that is there, you don't have to waive the right. But if you want that right, I would not sign your severance agreement. Yeah, okay, we're already at time, but I'm gonna hit these last two questions. I think there were two more that I saw. Let me see. Are resume and career coaching services really valuable and available? Yes. Yeah, like I said, sometimes recruiters, so sometimes new employers don't like to work with recruiters because then they have to pay the recruiter a fee. Well, let's see if your current employer will cover the fee. And then that way all a recruiter is doing is using their existing relationships. Because that's the thing about a good recruiter. If they are industry specific or geographically specific, I've had some in my career, they know everybody. They know everything about everybody already. And so they know if a company is looking without publicly looking. Companies look for jobs that never get posted. So the recruiter can really, really help you in that way. But like I said, sometimes new hire companies that are hiring don't want to work with a recruiter because they don't want to pay the fees. So get your current one to pay the fees, and stuff like that. That can be really, really valuable. It also just helps you not have to stress as much, all right? If you get 2 months of severance, let's enjoy that. 2 months, that's not 2 months that you need to freak out and panic. Enjoy your time off. Learn something new. Travel. And yet know that somebody's out there trying to get you a job. That right there, peace of mind for a few months, few weeks to breathe. That's really amazing, right? When's the last time you got a 2-month break? This type of stuff. So can it be valuable? Absolutely. Okay, one last one. Can I negotiate severance terms after I've signed? Usually no. Usually no, because you've already agreed to it. So why would they reopen negotiations? It's not in their favor. And that's the truth about any contract. A severance agreement is just a contract. It's a contract just like all the other contracts out there. Once you signed, you've accepted it, but you do not have to sign. So make sure that you're negotiating to get what you want, or walk away. Walk away if you want to. If you're like, no, I'm not going to sign an extended non-compete. I want a job. I have a job lined up. I'm not going to sign this. Those are your choices. 100% your choices. All right, so CEO Legal Coach here. Again, I've got a program called Severance Studio where I break down everything, give you checklists, walkthroughs, videos, resources. If you've been recently laid off, you're facing a severance agreement, everything's in there. And then I also have some articles written at ceolegalcoach.com/severance agreement. And that's agreement singular. All right, I go live every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And all this week, it is all about severance agreements. So keep thinking of your questions, your ideas. Share this with anybody who's being laid off or might get laid off, is scared of this, is nervous about it, because we want this to be a positive thing. Letting go of a job that wasn't right for you can actually be an amazing, amazing, powerful thing for you in your life. Let's let it be that. Let's work to make it that so you have an amazing, better future than the past you're about to leave behind. I'll see you all later. A lot of employees think that a severance package is a parting gift from their employer, when quite frankly, it's the opposite. Hidden fine print, reasons to sign away your rights, your value, and more happen And that's what we're going to go over today is those main red flags to look for before you sign any severance agreement in front of you. Hey everyone, it's Acacia, the CEO legal coach. And if you're new to this, I am a longtime attorney, business advisor for about 15, almost 20 years. And this is the Aligned Business Series. We go live 3 times a week, Tuesdays, Thursday, Fridays, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And I answer your questions live. Okay. So if you haven't found your chat button, make sure you do find it and add your questions to anything that's coming up in today's call, because I want to make sure you have what you need to succeed in the world, especially when you're dealing with a severance agreement. There's so much stress, so much panic, so many things that are put in there intentionally to distract you, right? They know that you're going to freak out that you're losing your job or you're losing that steady paycheck. Now, of course, 10 to 20% of people are like, that's okay, I have the money, or that's okay, I was going to start my own business. But what about everybody else that really relies on that paycheck or just wasn't ready to let it go? They know that by putting a few extra dollars in front of you, you're going to be distracted and want that and sign away things that you didn't realize you were signing. So today we're going to go over 6 key ones, okay? 6 key areas of red flags in severance agreements. There are more. When I was making this list, I was like, how do I keep this under like the 20, 30 minute with the Q&A? Because over the years, I have seen some serious red flags. And let's just start with the one that affects your pay. This one is one of the very first ones I see in a lot of agreements. And that is how the actual word they use to describe what you're going to get paid. The word they use, it's usually a vague or generic term. Like you're going to get 8 weeks worth of salary. What does that mean? Does that mean just your base salary? Does that mean your salary plus your average commissions? Your salary plus what would have been your annual bonus? What is determining this number? This is something that they intentionally leave vague because then they can go to the lower side and be like, well, you were okay with salary. And you'll be like, yeah, my salary is like 20% of my actual paycheck. I expected the rest. So the first red flag is just even making sure that the term they're using for what they're going to base your payment number on is not generic. That is specific. You know exactly what you're getting, what's included in that, your bonuses, your commission. What about the stock you had before? Is it going to finish vesting? Everything that you've been paid over your time there, go back and look if you can, or scan your memory, definitely for the last year. What was included in all of your paychecks? And make sure that whatever term they're using, your pay, your salary, whatever that is defined. That is a defined term. You definitely want that term to be defined, okay? Because if not, they can just say there, like, for example, I was in sales. My base salary was like, I don't know, 20, 40% of what I took home. So if my severance agreement said my base salary, well, they're missing 60 to 80% of what I was actually taking home, what I'm used to making, and so on. To where I actually, number-wise, would have been better on unemployment because I would get a higher percentage than what they were going to pay me in severance. So that's the first red flag in your severance agreement, okay, is whether or not there is a defined, clarified term, usually not, and you want to get that extremely clarified, okay? Now, the next red flag I see a lot. Hey, Mary. Hey, Bob. I see you guys. Yes, welcome. I will definitely keep answering your questions, so get them in the chat. So the other red flag that I decided to focus on today, like I said, we're going to go over 6 of them, is the difference in your non-compete versus your severance pay time frame. The difference in your non-compete versus your severance time frame. Now, non-competes vary in laws, just state to state, which also means it's going to vary what your employer is asking of you. But what I have seen is, let's say you have a non-compete that says you can't even apply for things in your industry for 6 months. Okay. Well, but they're only going to pay you severance for 2 months. Well, okay, so I can't apply for a job in my industry for 6 months, and then it's probably going to take me another month or 2 to get a job, and you're only going to offset that by 2 months of severance pay? That doesn't feel right. So understanding that balance of what is being asked of you in your non-compete, what opportunities does that allow you to do in the time frame? Like, again, let's say yours was 6 months, but I have seen them up to 2 years. I have seen them up to 2 years long. What is allowed in that, are you reasonably going to be able to find another job in that time? If not, they need to pay you for that because that's a benefit they're getting. They're holding you back from going to a competitor or a vendor or a supplier or a client. Well, if that's a right they want, they need to be paying you for that. And they need to pay you a severance that balances that weight to you. Because otherwise, you're going to not be able to get a job and not get paid. That's not really a fair exchange. Okay. So that's the second main difference I see is the value, the limitation, both in time and scope of that non-compete are not aligned to the severance time frame. So make sure that that is clarified. And if you need to go back and negotiate, and you can negotiate either the non-compete to be more open, be like, hey, you either need to reduce this down to 2 months, you need to open it up so I can apply to these types of employers, or you want more pay, right? So get what you need out of it, but it's a value exchange. So you have both sides of that. You can negotiate the non-compete and you can negotiate the severance pay. My opinion, do both. Do both. Why not, right? What's the worst I can say? No, the terms are what they are. Well, then you know not to sign that. Okay, so our third one now is, and you know what? I didn't put this up. Let me put this up. So those of you who don't know, I have a program called Severance Studio where I literally break down for employees that have been recently laid off everything I know, everything I've ever learned. I put it in there and it's meant for employees, right? This isn't legal jargon. This isn't legal. This is to help you review and quickly get through your severance agreement, making sure that you're not being taken advantage of and you can get the best that you can, or at least what feels right to you. Okay. So the third thing, and this one just happened to a client this week, the third red flag when it comes to your severance agreements is the timing of that severance pay. The timing of that severance pay. Why does this matter? Because if you're on unemployment and you suddenly get a bonus check from that employer, well, you can't be on unemployment anymore. You just got payment. So we want to understand, like a client I had this week, he's like, hey, my severance pay was supposed to be like 2 or 3 months after, but then I went back. I talked to him. I was like, let's go get your bonus brought into this. Right? So he's like, went back to the employer. Was like, I want to negotiate my bonus into that definition of severance pay, that salary. And they were willing to consider that. But they're like, not a problem, but we're going to pay you your bonus in like the February, March time that we normally would. Well, his state has 6 months of unemployment. So if he gets paid those 2 or 3 months plus the 6 months and he'll be on unemployment, assuming he couldn't find a job or his non-compete was 6 months. In the middle of that, he's going to suddenly get a bonus check. Well, that's going to stop the rest of his unemployment. So we cared about the timing of those payments. It sounds great. You're going to get your bonus, but you want to make sure that it's going to be in a time frame that's not going to knock out other money. That's not going to knock out other benefits in your state. So be mindful of what is being paid when and how that's going to affect any unemployment that you might have access to or rights to after. Okay. So that's our third thing. The next one, I got to say this, it amazes me because this one is super important to me, but I've never really had my clients care about it. And I find it so interesting because as a lawyer, this is one of the most important things to me. And I think that's because I understand it differently than the average person does, right? The average person, you probably care about the money. You probably care about your benefits. You probably care about getting that next job. Top 3 priorities right there. Yes, very, very important. And I want those to be your priorities. They are priorities. But when it comes to a severance agreement, what you're really doing is a value exchange. There's a value exchange. And so far, 10 out of 10, but I'm going to say 9 out of 10 times, you're waiving rights to sue them. And that's normal. That's a normal ask. And I'm not opposed to waiving rights for things up to what's happening. Okay, they don't want you to sue them for the way they're laying you off. Okay, that makes sense. You're going to get a paycheck, the severance pay in exchange for not suing them right now. Okay, you know whether or not you want to waive that right. You know if you have any reasons you might want to sue your employer for whatever reason. It doesn't even have to be related to this. You know this. But what happens so many times on severance agreements is future things you may not know about yet. And I'll give you an example. Let's say, so right now your employer probably has a picture of your IDs, like your passport, your driver's license, social security card, whatever documentation you gave them to be employed there. And they hold that because they need that for government purposes. They have your social security number. They have your bank info. That's how they give you your direct deposits. They have a lot of info on you. And let's say that there is a data breach. A data breach. It could be this week. It could be in 2 years. But you don't know about it. You don't know about it. And let's say that ends up with some massive fraud against you. That ends up with you losing money out of your bank account, whatever. That could be really, really harmful depending on who gets the info and how they use it. But if you've waived future rights, you can't do anything about that. You have to sit there and suck it up. You don't get to sue your employer. Most of the time, the way I see how broad these are written, you wouldn't even get to go after the hacker. You're stuck with that because you waived future rights, rights to things you didn't know, rights to things that hadn't even come up yet. So when we're looking at our severance agreements, I do think it is appropriate and a fair value exchange, my personal opinion, you can decide for you, to waive rights to sue about things that you know about. Waive rights to sue about things up until the date of the severance pay. But future things that you don't know about, you don't know the value. You don't know the value of that, so you can't get the value of that. You can't say, well, if this hacker thing situation happens, that's worth $500,000 to me. Odds are you're not going to get $5,000 extra in your severance pay right now, but that's what you gave up. And it could be something else as simple as like, oh, they find out they had lead paint in the office and now we're in a class action suit because a lot of people had this outcome from that. Well, you can't be part of that either. And so it doesn't matter what type of case it is. It doesn't matter how big or small. It doesn't matter if it applied to you or all the employees. It doesn't matter. You're waiving future rights, which means you're waiving things you don't know. And that's why I don't like them being given up, is because you can't put a value on that. You can't put a number on it. You can't put a real analysis of what this means to you and your family. So that's one of the other red flags, okay, is that waiving of the future rights. It is very common and acceptable if you feel that you would rather take this money than sue your employer for things that you are aware of. That's normal to ask for in a severance agreement by your employer. But do know, you don't have to sign this agreement. You do not have to sign it. But if you don't sign it, you don't get the value exchange. So you won't get that severance pay. So if you have any intent on suing, or at least want to explore suing your employer, get an employment lawyer in your state now. Now. Get in there and get that consultation. Get an idea of, do you have a strong case? How much money would this case be worth or not worth? And then you could decide against the pay they're offering you. You get to balance that, okay? And we go through all this in the Severance Studio. There's an entire module just on waiving rights, All right, number five on our list, the fifth red flag. The fifth red flag, I mentioned it indirectly earlier, and that's overly broad terms in your non-compete. Overly broad terms in your non-compete. I have seen such overly broad terms that a person couldn't apply to anything in a 200-mile radius of where they lived, a 200-mile radius of any office, and anything literally in the industry. It even said the word. There was a particular, it's like saying you can't do anything in IT. They literally said that. It is like, what is this person supposed to do? What is this person supposed to do? And then it also said you can't reach out to our suppliers. You can't reach out to our vendors. You can't use any of the relationships you have. You can't do anything. He was just like, can I do anything? Can I do anything? So non-competes, this is really important to know. Non-compete laws vary state to state. And this can be really, really difficult. So last year, the FTC tried to ban non-competes across the board, because there were so many employers who were being abusive and overly inclusive in their language. Overly inclusive. It's like, do you really need to prevent your employees from ever applying to a place within 200-mile radius for 2 years? And they can, you're basically preventing them from making a living. So the government tried to step in. It got overturned in court. So it's back to every state gets to do their thing. Some states, your employer can get away with almost anything on that paper, which is why it's important you negotiate it. It's important you negotiate it to what matters to you. What do you need to do? Even starting your own business might fall into that non-compete, probably does. Where other states, I think California, I'm not licensed in California, but I think California is one of the most favorable to employees, where the employer has to demonstrate that it's necessary to protect their business to have these limitations. Now, what's really important to know is if you have any doubt that your non-compete might be illegal in your state, don't sign it because you're still signing an agreement, a contract. You still have a contractual bound. And no offense, but you're not the one to determine whether or not it is or is not illegal. So what would end up happening is you signed it, you're in breach of contract. You're in breach of contract the second you violate it, which number 6 we're going to get to. I was going to be like, it's going to hurt. And then you've got to go deal with a cease and desist. You might lose your job that you got over it because your current employer is going to tell your future employer, by the way, this person violated this. So you're going to lose that job, and then it becomes a mess. And then you're involved in court, potentially, legal fees, all this stuff. And even if you win, and you were right that non-compete was illegal, you just had to go through all of that chaos to get to that point. That sucks. So the best thing to do is if you have first, just try to negotiate it. Just try and negotiate it. And if you have any doubts that it might be illegal, then use that as leverage. Like, hey, I believe you're pushing, I don't know, Massachusetts state law about this or Illinois state law about this. And so I want this reduced. And of course, get an attorney involved if that is what you think is going on, especially if your employer is not budging, if they won't open up that non-compete to allow you to make a living. All right, number 6. Are we ready? Okay. Clawback provisions. This is a red flag for you. It's a red flag for you. It is normal to see these in there, but they don't have to be in your severance agreement. And it's not going to usually be called a clawback provision. But what it does is it says if you violate this agreement, like we just talked about, if you end up applying for a job that you weren't allowed to apply for thanks to your non-compete, if you end up getting employed and you don't tell them, well, they can take your money back. This is the importance of a clawback provision. They can take the money back in certain situations, and they put it right in the document. So you want to be mindful. Do you have any of these? You want to be mindful if you have any of these. There's another one. It's not a full clawback, but there's a cutoff. And that's if you get employed before the severance ends, 8 out of 10 times you have to tell them and they get to stop paying you. Right? They can take the money back in a lot of situations, or at least cut you off from it. So these are a red flag you want to be aware of, especially if there's any language in that document that you're a little wishy-washy about, okay? You want to make sure it gets clarified so that you're not in violation of any of these things, okay? So that's the 6 main things that we went over. 1, you want to make sure that the definition of pay, your salary, whatever vague term they're using is clarified, because they will default to the absolute lowest amount that they can pay you for it. Second, you want to know the difference in your non-compete versus your severance pay time frame. Very important, because you might end up going unpaid for part of that. 3, the timing of that severance pay and its impact on unemployment. What is convenient to your employer might actually cut off your benefits. 4, we talked about waiving those future rights. It's impossible to put a value on it. That's why I don't like it on the page. But a lot of my clients just seem to go with it and pray for the best. I leave that up to you, of course. But future rights could be worth millions. Don't let them, but you just don't know. You might know. And nothing might come along, or something major might come along. 5, those overly broad terms in your non-compete, they can prevent you from applying for a job, getting a job, and then they cause a big bunch of chaos, and you might end up losing that new job over it. And last but not least, those clawback provisions, where the employer can come in, take the money back, cut the money off, all of those types of things. Like, you'd be like, well, I paid it to mortgage. Doesn't matter. You owe it back. Like, that sucks, right? So don't let that happen to you. All right, I see questions in there. Let's get to those questions. Hey, Asser. Hey, Emmy. Yes. Oh, thanks for being here, guys. I love it. I love you all. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yes, it is a different color of lipstick today. Let's see. If my agreement just says salary without a number, should I sign? It's not whether or not you should sign. It's that you want to know what salary means. What does that mean? Salary. If you've only just had one base check, that's fine, right? It's not a big deal because there's only one number it could be. But if you make commission, if you make any type of like percentages off of certain sales or or kickbacks. That's not the right word, but also bonuses. Like, what about your annual bonus? Like I said, my client right now, he was up. There's the opportunity for his bonus to be added in. We were talking about that. He went to the employer's looking at it, but when does that get paid? How does that get paid? They weren't going to pay that. So understanding what the number means, that's what's important here, because we don't want them to default to the lowest that they could pay you. Well, that was your base salary. And you're like, my base salary is worth 10% of my annual take home. Like, what the heck? You want to really know what it means. And then the other thing is, you don't have to sign. You do not have to sign if you're not comfortable signing, right? If they want you to sign it, they want you to waive these rights, they need to make it worth your while. Know that, okay? But also know if you don't sign, you don't get those benefits. Yep. Can I ask them to add the exact dollar amount into the agreement? I mean, an exact dollar amount is a lot more clear than salary, pay, so absolutely. If that's what you want to do, then do that. Sure. Why not? The thing is, before that number gets calculated, though, make sure it is accurate. Make sure that is the full number that you actually truly want. What if my severance lasts 2 months, but the non-compete is 12 months? Back to both sides of that are negotiable. Both sides of that are negotiable. You can get that severance to last longer. You can do that. You can get that non-compete to be shorter in time frame. Hey, 2 months of pay. Well, I want a 2-month non-compete. Or what you could do is negotiate how broad it is, right? It might be 12 months, but it simply says you can't go to our 3 main competitors. That's not very limiting. That's not a very limiting one. So even though it's 12 months, you can't go to our 3 main competitors is small. That still leaves a lot of places for you to go to get employed. So it's not really unfair. So it's the overall scope and impact of the non-compete. Is it that you can't apply anywhere, or is it that you can't be hired anywhere, or that you can't start, right? We can interview, we can get hired, and just push our start date back. Versus, and how broad is it? No jobs within 200 miles of where you live, or just nobody that's our 3 competitors in your area. So look at how broad it is, what they're asking and restricting of you, and what that means for you. What do you want next? Some people want to go start their business. Okay, well, does your non-compete allow you to do that? Other people just want to find another job. Okay, does your non-compete allow you to go to the type of employers in your area, or the type of employers in your industry that let you work hybrid or remote or whatever it is you need? See what's out there as your opportunities and compare that back to the pay. But know that both sides of it, absolutely negotiable. Do all severance agreements include a non-compete? I have yet to see one with that one. But what I would say is sometimes it's not in the severance agreement. Sometimes it was in your offer letter. Back when you signed on and you're like, yes, I want this salary. Let's start. I'm so excited. And that could have been years ago. There might have been a non-compete in that. And then what they do is they attach that to your severance agreement. As a friendly reminder, don't forget you have this. So where it is different than does it apply, right? Does it include there? Even if it was in your offer letter, you still get to negotiate it now. Saying, hey, you're letting me go for this severance. I'm only going to sign this. Remember, it's optional to sign this agreement. They want things out of you. They want you to waive your rights to certain things because it's in their interest to pay you, not to sue them. Suing costs a lot of money. And so if they can give you a fraction of that and get you to not to sue them, that's a big deal to them. Saves them a lot of time, a lot of headache. It's going to save you time and headache. It's worth it. So look at that. Where is the non-compete? And let's say you had a really, really broad one in your offer letter. It is okay to ask to negotiate that down in this document. Bring it down. Now, one thing to know about everything we've talked about, and this is definitely in the severance program, right? The severance studio program where I break everything down by money matters, by insurance. We go through a lot about your insurance because there's stuff about insurance you don't know is happening. Your waiver of rights, what are you doing, and the overall value exchange that's happening. Each one of them has a module and checklist and stuff in Severance Studio. So if you're facing this, know that there's a resource for you. And one of the things we talk about in that is the idea of the entire agreement clause. They're 99.99% of all contracts in the United States, not just severance agreements, but all contracts, have what's called an entire agreement clause. And what that means is anything you get in an email, anything you have in those conversations, confirming with HR and your boss and all those things, they don't matter. So even though you're like, oh, we're negotiating what the word salary means, that's going to include commissions and bonus and blah, blah, your email doesn't matter. You need it literally written in this document. It literally must be explicitly stated in this document. Otherwise, that entire agreement clause, that's what it's called, entire agreement clause, will push it out. An entire agreement clause in a contract, what it does is it says only what's written on the four corners of this paper matter. If it's not on this paper, we have decided that it no longer applies to the situation. Okay? And because you'll be signing after all those emails and after all those clarifications, you're signing that those things didn't matter, that you got everything you wanted and needed on this piece of paper. So everything we're talking about today about that non-compete versus the severance pay, the definition of salary versus anything else, you want it explicitly put on the paper. It is not enough to have that email from HR or your boss. I think there was more. Did I find? Oh, I love you guys. Thank you. Happy Thursday to you. If I sign, can I sue later for unpaid bonuses or overtime? Majority of the time, no. Majority of the time, no. Like I said, it is normal and expected that every severance agreement, you're giving up your rights to sue up until the date of severance pay for everything. The question is whether or not future ones are. Now, that being said, there are certain rights that are under federal law, which, by the way, is not as protective, is a lot harder to prove. It has a completely different standard. It's not very employee friendly sometimes, if I'm honest, that you can't waive. So they're not allowed to make you waive those under federal law, but that doesn't mean something that state law doesn't apply. So if you have any concerns about potentially suing your employer, go talk to an employment litigation law firm immediately. Immediately. Here is why. You don't know the value of your lawsuit. You don't know how well you're prepared to prove it. Even if they did, in fact, violate the law, being able to prove it at court is a different question. So then what you could do is a lot of law firms give you like a free consultation. Go talk to them. See what it would take to sue them. See what it would take, the likelihood of outcome. Are you likely to win? And if so, how much? Because now you could see that even if you have a lawsuit, maybe your severance pay is better or better off, right? Lawsuits can take years. It's exhausting. And it's going to be out of your pocket to make that happen up front, depending on the case, right? Some law firms will foot the bill for you and then just take that out of your winnings. But you want to know that now. You want to know that now. So do not sign a severance agreement at all. This is why you get that window of time to review it. You get that window of time to review it because you are waiving rights. So this is your time to explore them and then see. So if you have unpaid bonuses or overtime, first off, know that anything they owe you, they cannot withhold from you. If you've earned a bonus or you have overtime from last month that's owed to you, your severance agreement is not allowed for you to waive that. They owe you what you've paid, like what you've earned. Always, always, always. But when we've talked about, bonuses, not overtime, but bonuses, the commissions, maybe you have unpaid PTO. Some states, they're required to pay you out for that PTO. Other states, they're not. So back to that definition of what are you going to get paid out on? That is something that once you define that and it's clarified, there's no going back on that. You can't sue for that. Okay. My agreement says that I can't work for any competitor in the industry. Is that normal? Yes, but we can do better. So any competitor in the industry, that is the whole point of a non-compete. Competitors. You can't go to a competitor. That's how these all started. And it makes sense. You don't want to take your processes, your trade secrets. Even if you're just a sales employee, you know their client list. You know when those client agreements are up and all those. That's all insider info, right? That's behind the scenes insider info. So when you go to one of their competitors, you're bringing that with you, even though it's not malicious intent or you're trying to undermine them or anything. It's just, stuff. You learned it there. And you're smart. You have this in your brain. So it is normal for them to not want you to go to their competitors. What's difficult here is, what does that mean? A competitor. So I like to recommend my clients get a list from them and explicitly state in the agreement, you're not allowed to go work for these employers in these types of roles. Here's why. One, a competitor, what that is, will change over time. What a competitor is will change over time. Other companies might merge their way into this company's, your current employer's space. Your current employer might spread it to other. What is a competitor changes over time. Second, so you want to limit that list, right? Now you know that list and it's time stamped. So if that changes over time, your employer doesn't get to come along and be like, well, you said 2 years ago you signed a 2-year non-compete that you wouldn't work for a competitor. And you'd be like, well, they weren't a competitor at that time, but they are now. So I like to get that list. The second thing is the roles. Why does the roles matter? Here's why. I've worked for Fortune 500s, multiple divisions. Every division has a completely different product line or a different part of the industry, how we did things, what we did, and what the laws and compliance were. So when you have a lot of big companies like that, what you're saying by saying you can't go to any of our competitors is that you can't work in any of their divisions. If I only worked in division 1, why can't I go work for your competitor in division 4? There's no overlap, but it works. But the name at the top, the company name, is a competitor. You can't go there. So I want that narrowed down for you, especially if you're dealing with larger businesses in your industry, is that it doesn't matter if you work in a different division. It has nothing to do with the other one. But you said you want to work for a competitor, so they can say, well, this company competes with us in this division. We don't want you there at all. I'm like, come on. So that's what I like to recommend for non-competes is get it clarified, get it narrow, and get it like something limited to today, not what might happen with either company in the future. Because I don't know about you. I haven't figured out, but I have not figured out how to predict the future yet. I think there was one more question. Can the company really take back my severance after they pay it? You're signing a contract. You're signing an agreement. And this is agreement, like I said, it's not required by law. So everything in this is what you're negotiating. Once you sign that, you've agreed to it. And if you've agreed to them taking that money back for whatever those reasons are, the answer is yes. Yes, they really can come take it back and it would be legal because it's what you agreed to in the contract. 100%. Okay. So, hey everyone, ceolegalcoach.com/severance-agreement. I've got a number of articles there. Then, of course, if you're interested in the Severance Studio where I break everything down, I even have some extra exercises, bonuses, and videos in there. But it covers money matters, a whole video, checklist and guide on that. Covers the insurance matters, what to expect, how that's going to go, video, guide, and checklist on that. Then we also have the waiver of rights, like what are you giving up, this versus that. And what is the other thing? Oh my gosh, there's more in there. There's 4 main modules, and then there's some extras to make sure that you have a full checklist and you're not going to miss anything major or that's important to you in your severance agreement. Tomorrow we go live again, 10 a.m. Pacific time, and we are talking about what to negotiate. What key areas do you want to be negotiating? Today was about the red flags. What key areas can you negotiate? Can't you negotiate? We're going to talk about it tomorrow. I'll see you then. The agony, the panic of a layoff, because I've been laid off before. I've been unemployed more than once in my life, and I've had the financial panic. I have had those moments where I don't know what to do. And what started to happen is I started to realize there was a lot of opportunity in these moments, but I was in such a state of panic or so worried about the next paycheck that I stopped and made them happen. But in the beginning, I was so frantic, I never noticed them. And it wasn't until I was done with my unemployment or my layoff period that I started to realize I could have been more of me in this moment. I could have been more of me. So that's what I want to dedicate today's call to. It was just the power of reframing that panic, the power of reframing the panic from a layoff, because there is a lot. And it sucks and it hurts because when you got laid off, you probably felt a little tinge of it was you. It's not you. Having been on both sides of these, I can tell you it's not you. That's the difference between being fired and a layoff. Being fired means you did something or you failed to do something that was in alignment or whatever. A layoff means it was simply a business decision. A business decision. Some product line didn't work as well. The cash flow is down. We're moving offices. Something that happens with or without you. It has nothing to do with you. But of course, it impacts all of you. So, like I said, I've been laid off before, and I had just moved to a new state. And the job that I took with me, I transferred with it. That transition did not work out well. So we both mutually agreed, okay, it was time for me to go. But I didn't get unemployment. It wasn't a severance. It wasn't a layoff. It wasn't that type of a thing. I just went back out into the market and was like, we're going to find something else. And so spent a few months like that. And then I finally got a job. Finally got a job. And around day 80, I got laid off. I had just come off of being unemployed. What? Are you kidding me? My bank account was hemorrhaging. It wasn't ready for this. My mental wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for this. And so here is what I learned. That when we first get laid off, we have a panic. And that panic is usually about two things: the paycheck, the money, right? But also the unknown. I don't know when that next paycheck's going to come. I don't know when this is going to happen. I don't know. What I can say is a couple things. One, you have resources available to you. Okay. And we're going to go through some of that today. And we're going to talk about reframing, what I did to actually turn my unemployment, especially that second one, into like an all-star series of months. All-star. And what it starts with is recognizing that, yes, it's true, you don't know where your next paycheck is going to come from or when it's going to come. But here's what I do know. If you're stressing and you're panicking, you will have another paycheck. You will. You're not the type of person that wouldn't let you not. You're not the type of person that's going to give up and just, I don't know, that's it, sell the mortgage, file bankruptcy. You're not going to let that happen. You're going to fight because it means so much to you. What I also know is you're already employable. You just got done being employed by a company that didn't handle their stuff right on the bottom line for whatever reason, which means you can get another job. You can get another job. So we know you're going to have another paycheck. We know you're going to get another job. We know this about you. We also know that if you're lucky enough to get a severance package, you're going to have some money coming. I did not get a severance package. Nope. I was just let go. And it was horrible too. We had our team calls and our like division calls the 2 weeks prior, and everyone was like, don't worry guys, we're going to hold off at least 2 months. No one's getting laid off for at least 2 months. And then all of a sudden there was a call on my calendar on a Friday. And there it was. You're being laid off. They'd promised 2 months at a minimum. I didn't make it 2 weeks. So that happened, and I didn't get a severance at all. So if you have a severance, know that alone right there, you're going to have some money to feed yourself with. You're going to have some money to put the roof over your head. Maybe you're not going to be able to buy the organic stuff from Whole Foods or Sprouts or whatever, but you're going to be able to put a roof over your head a little bit longer. You're going to be able to feed yourself and your family a little bit longer. And this is the other thing that is phenomenal about this opportunity is you have unemployment. When I'm not going to lie, I was on unemployment. I've been on unemployment before. And I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed. I was relying on this government thing to pay my bills. But then I started to realize, is there anything wrong with making sure my bills are paid? No. And where does this money come from? This money comes from the fact that I'd been paying into it. All those little deductions that you see on your paychecks over the years, you're like, wow, they sure are taking out a lot. Well, some of that's been going to unemployment. It's unemployment insurance. It's a form of insurance. It's like life insurance or health insurance, anything else that you would take insurance on, except this time it's been being managed by the government for you. It's your money. You paid into it. There is no shame in getting your money, asking for it, and doing the right thing with it, taking care of yourself, your life, your home and the people you love. There is no shame in that. And yet somebody like me, I was a lawyer, a corporate lawyer, this and that. I was a director of this. And I just felt so shameful that I needed help, that I needed the government to help me. I am so grateful that I had unemployment available to me. I am so grateful because here's what it allowed me to do. And this is where we're going to start to shift our mindset about a few things. Let me put them on the screen. I have an exercise that I did, absolutely free, totally free here. I'm not going to charge you guys for anything right now. That'd be ridiculous. The website's not on it. It's ceolegalcoach.com/layoff opportunity, layoff-opportunity, CEO Legal Coach /layoff opportunity. And what it started to do for me is I could breathe. I knew some money was coming in. And I knew some money was coming in no matter what I did. No, the money wasn't going to last forever, but 6 months, which is what it was in my state at the time, I can do a lot in 6 months. You can do a lot in 6 months, right? So do something you've never gotten to do before. Let's start to look at all the ways your job has prohibited you from living your best life. You have to be somewhere at a certain time and date every single day. You have to attend the meetings that you don't want to attend. You have to get certain tasks done no matter what the deadline or turnaround is. That's suddenly gone for you. That is now breathing space. If you wanted to sleep in tomorrow, you can. And you know money is coming in. Now, I'm not going to sit here and recommend that you just sleep your entire unemployment, your unemployment window away. But here is what I'm saying, is this is space to breathe. And as we've already discussed, you're not the type of person who's never going to have a job again. You will. Of course you will. You're you. You're not going to stop until you get another paycheck. You're not going to stop until things are back on track. We know that. But in order for you to give your best and to get the best job you can right now, you need to breathe. You need to connect with your best and bring it back out. And being in panic mode is absolutely understandable, but it's not your best. It's not where we bring our best. And in fact, it's where we are the least creative. Our body is going to do whatever it can just to survive. And as we just discussed, you're going to survive. You've got a little bit of breathing room here to survive. No, you're not making 100%. No, you're not going to get, your full bonus. No, you're not going to be living your best life, but you can still live a good life and set yourself up so that the next one is better. So that's one of the reasons I made this exercise, right? So this move past the panic exercise, what it is it's going to do it does two things. I call it the 20 ways exercise, okay? And you're going to first stop and look at 20 ways being laid off is a good thing for you. This is the universe in action. I'm sure there have been things you've been wanting to do in your life, do with your day. One of the things I did, I really had wanted to always study photography. Study it, practice it, get out, do the homework of it, explore the world, take my camera. And I couldn't. Sure, I'd taken, classes on the nights or the weekends or something like that, but I never really got to sit down and just study it. So one of the things I did in my layoff is I bought the $50 for the month, unlimited access to the great courses. And I took every single class program session that National Geographic did on photography. Basics of photography, intermediate photography, travel photography, wildlife photography. I did that nonstop, and it took me about, I think, 3-4 weeks to get through it all. And I still have my notebook from it all. I took it serious. I got up, I would practice every single thing before I would go into the next lesson. Make sure I mastered it. Do you know what happened? I'm an award-winning photographer. I'm an award-winning photographer because I got laid off and chose to do something with it. Because yes, of course I was applying for jobs. Of course I was doing these other things, but guess what? A day can only be filled with so much of that. This is a time for you to do the things you haven't been able to do in your life. And you get to do that knowing that there is some money coming in and that you will have a paycheck on the other side of it because that is who you are. So that's the first part of this exercise. This exercise is 20 ways. This 20 ways is going to be a good thing for you. And then I list 20 ways. So after the exercise, you actually get to see my list of 20 ways, and this could be a great thing for you, right? Learn something new is one of them. But what about your family? What about walking your kids to school? I'm sure you've been there as a parent, but have you really been there? Been able to be in the moment, not distracted by your email, your cell phone, or a deadline, a meeting call, something? You get to do that now and have these moments. Build them into this experience, right? So these are just some of the different ways. But then what the exercise does is we take it a step further and we look at 20 ways the universe can send you $20,000 right now. $20,000 right now. Because something else that I had to realize, and maybe you're in this too, is I was accustomed to getting money from a paycheck. And I was accustomed to getting that paycheck through employment, through full-time employment, by being my best, by doing all these things. Get the education, get the job, get the paycheck. There you go. And I started to open up my mind and realize that's not the only way to get a paycheck. It's not the only way money comes in. Money can come in a lot of other ways. I don't have to wait between now and then to bring in money, to attract money. So that's the other thing that this exercise does, okay, is it's going to do that for you. It's going to help you see right now you are more open and free than you've ever been. You are more open and free than you've ever been. And let's build something fucking phenomenal out of it. Because when we sit there in the stress and the adrenaline and the panic, we're looking to solve one problem instead of trying to build a great life. Okay, so that's why I put together this exercise. Yes, I'm going to still answer questions. I do see some of the comments coming in. I'm glad this is helpful for you because it is really, really frustrating that you've given all your all, those nights, those weekends, those overtimes to this job, and this is how they treat you. It sucks, but it is not you. And in fact, this might be the universe telling you it's time to do what you've always wanted to do. And now you get the space to do both. Apply for jobs, do interviews, go get a recruiter, go do all the other things to get your next job because you already know how to get a job. You've been employed. You're employable. You're phenomenal. You're a fighter. That is why you're having this adrenaline rush. That doesn't have to be the only thing that comes out of it. Because what ends up happening is in 4 months, when you get employed again, you're going to look back and you'll be like, man, I could have slept in a few times a week. Man, if only I had seen that I could have gone and worked from anywhere. Oh man, I could have spent more time with the family. One of the things that I did is during mine is I also decided to go travel to the places, right? I didn't have money to go like truly travel. I was unemployed. But I could get in the car, take the camping gear, and drive somewhere that I couldn't get to on a weekend. So I was in Michigan at the time, so I went up to Mackinac Island. I went up to the UP. I went and explored the things that were too far for me to get to on my Friday through Sunday camping trips. And I get to go midweek. I got to do the things that I couldn't do while I was employed, knowing that I was still handling everything I needed to do to bring about my next job. And so at first the idea of like, well, what am I going to tell my next employer, right? They're going to ask me, first off, when you say that you were laid off, every employer knows that's not personal. They know that. They know it wasn't you. Being fired or let go, that's different. But laid off? Nah. They just know it was wrong time, wrong place kind of a thing. But they might ask, well, what have you been up to in that time? And so I got to tell them, I got laid off right before the start of the summer. So I took advantage of that. I'd always been wanting to learn photography, so I learned photography. And then I traveled around the Midwest in the summer, and I got to go to all the camping sites and the state parks that you don't get to go to. And, and I told them, I framed it like this. And I was like, and then I had a family vacation planned, and it didn't make sense for me to try and get a new job just before that family vacation started. So I waited till the end of the vacation. Vacation ended 2 weeks ago, and so now I'm back in the job market. The hiring managers didn't look at me like I was crazy. They looked at me like I was brilliant. I didn't just sit there and panic. Oh my God, I just applied for jobs for 2 months. No, they saw that I was somebody who comes with gratitude, that I'm somebody who knows how to take advantage of an opportunity, that I'm creative. And they also saw that I had rested and I was ready to get back to work. These were all things that were extremely important to them. So it was no surprise. I got an offer letter 2 days later. Unemployment does not have to be a bad thing. Let's take the moment to reframe it. Allow it to be something great. Hey, and it's done. Thank you. I appreciate you too, love. I'm sorry if you're going through this or if you know anybody who's going through this, but this really can be amazing. So if you want, grab the download. If you want to just have it in worksheet form, absolutely free, guys. It's just your email and your name. That's all I need because I'm going to email it to you. To help you, right? I know it's scary. I've been there. Been unemployed more than once. Been on unemployment. The second time I was unemployed, it lasted the full 6 months. It took me that long to get that new job. But that new job changed my life. My whole life changed because I saw my life and how I lived it differently. And I want that for you too, okay? So let's see. Were there any questions in here? I think I saw some questions earlier. How do I stop the constant anxiety and panic attacks when one thing to remember is, why are you even panicking? You panic because you care. You panic because you care. That means something. You panic because you care and you want to fix it. You will. Somebody who wants to do something will get it done. But just remember that when we have those panic attacks, what we're doing is saying, I can only focus on one thing. Our body gets so adrenalized, right? So much adrenaline that we go into fight or flight mode. And we can only focus on the one thing. We can't build a life because your life is more than one thing. And when you're focused on the one thing. So, I've got the exercise. You could do some meditations. You can go online, abundance meditations. Oh, that's right. I did. I just recently finished. It's absolutely free. It's on my YouTube channel. It's a series. It's a 21-day wealth and abundance meditation series. So every day it's just like 10, 12 minutes of meditation about wealth and abundance. And you go through it, and over the period, like, it'll help change your mindset about things. So give yourself the opportunity to, I see the note already. The YouTube channel is at CEO Legal Coach, at CEO Legal Coach, CEO Legal Coach, okay, on YouTube, one word. So that's there too, right? So give yourself the opportunity to calm down. Tell yourself it's going to be okay. Because you know it's going to be okay. You're not going to let it be anything other than that. You can do this. So give yourself the opportunity and remind yourself, I can't be fun and creative and come up with my brilliant, you might come up with $1 million idea here. Like, seriously, you have 6 months. What on unemployment plus whatever severance? Like, are you kidding me? Let's do something with this. Let's make something amazing. Do be mindful that, starting a job or a company, and once you start to get revenue, that can undo your unemployment, but you can do all the business planning. You can learn everything you need to learn. You can do all of those types of things right here, right now. You have the space to do it, and then also apply for jobs, right? So use the 20 ways exercise to help you get through that, okay? How long should I wait before I start applying for new jobs? Only you can answer that. Only you can answer that. But I would suggest give yourself a day or two here to just breathe. This is a little traumatizing. There's shock. Give yourself the space to recover. Give yourself the self-love. 2 days is not going to hurt you right now, right? Especially if you've just been told you're laid off, you probably are still employed for a few more days, or if not a few more weeks. Give yourself some breathing space, okay? And then when it feels right, because you might decide, you know what? One of the times after I was laid off, I actually kind of changed my career a little bit. Still in the legal space, but doing something differently for law firms. I did a little pivot. I actually made a lot more money at it. That's what was kind of crazy, because it came from a place of passion and heart. I feel completely worthless. How do I get my confidence back? Oh, love, please don't feel worthless. You're not worthless at all. Look at you. Look at everything you've ever done in this world. Look at the fact that you're on this call right now. You are worthy enough of putting something into a message and me reading it. You're not worthless. You just changed my life and the life of everybody on this call by simply even being honest and vulnerable. So thank you for being vulnerable. Oh my God, I want to cry that you feel that way. Please don't feel the way. I love that you're asking, how do you get your confidence back? Because it means it's already in you. Your confidence is already yours. It's already in you, but it might need a moment to process. And that's okay. Remember, layoffs are not personal. It's simply business. Our product line didn't work right. They have to change offices. all the tariffs that are happening, all of these changes in the environment, legal things change too. Businesses have to pivot. They have to keep profit on the books. And if letting people go is how they fix the numbers, that's how they fix the numbers. It's not you. It was never you. You were employable. You were employed. And you were such a good employee that you didn't get fired. That alone already says you have a value to employers. And now's your opportunity to give value to yourself, your friends, and your family, and your life in a way that your job maybe had taken it before. Everyone is asking, you know what? You want to fix it in the moment. Of course you do. Of course you do. But your job is part of your value exchange in life. And you're not here to just be a worker. You're not here to be a worker bee. You're here to live a thriving, abundant, fulfilling life. And that doesn't happen in a moment either, but you need a moment of clarity to know what direction to go. Yeah. How do I stay positive when the job search feels hopeless? How do you stay positive when the job search feels hopeless? I'm like trying to figure out which side of that I want to get to first. I can answer both sides. Staying positive is always a choice, love. Do you guys know about my 2% exercise? Have I ever told you guys that one? So it's really simple. When I'm trying to manifest something new in my life, and then life happens. Like I had a heart attack, like not literally, but a family member, very close friend, suddenly had blood. It was a situation. My heart sank. My heart sank. And I had to go to work. I had to go teach. And so I was not in 100% mood. I was not in the space where I'm like, let's lead the next generation of leaders here at all. But I also didn't want to inject my mood into their day. That's not what they're there for. So I simply asked myself, okay, Keisha, we know you're not 100%. I'm like, nope, we're not 100% at all. Where are you? And I was like, I'm maybe like 28%. I can give 28% of myself right now. I was like, okay. Thank you for that honesty. I see that. I see that is where you're at. Can I ask you a favor? Can you move it up 2%? Can you go from 28% to 30%? I go, yeah, I can bring myself up 2%. I can make myself be at 30% right now instead of 28. And then I did that again. Can you get yourself to another 2%? Can you move your mood from 30% to 32%? And I did this until I hit my threshold. And I was able to move up about 8 to 10 percentages. No, I wasn't going to run at 100% that day. I just wasn't. But I could do better than my default. And so that's one of the ways I use the 2% rule is that right there. So when you're not feeling positive about your job search, ask yourself, can I elevate myself just 2% today? And then allow yourself to be creative. Be creative. Just because you got a job this way before doesn't mean it's the only way you get a job now. Maybe you have other people, maybe the people who you reached out to last time are in a different role, have different influence or power. Teams that weren't hiring before are hiring now, and vice versa. Okay? Remember, hopelessness is a mindset. It's not the truth. There are jobs out there, and the right one is trying to find you. Get yourself on the right frequency so that you create your space. You create the research to find it, or the right connection, and you have the right words on the paper to where it just suddenly falls into place. Okay? You can do that. And then, like I said, you can only apply for jobs so much. There's only so much out there, only so many letters you can send a day. Go do something that makes you happy. For me, that was photography. So I went and did that. Another time it was, I started an Etsy store. Started putting all my art onto Etsy. So I needed to make more art. So I went and did more art, right? I found another outlet. When you focus your whole day about one thing and it doesn't come through, it starts to feel like failure. It's not that you're failing at it. You're making progress every day. It's that you're so focused on it that give yourself a rest. You ever have those things where like the moment you stop thinking about it is when it comes to your mind? That, yeah. What's the very first thing I should do when I get laid off? Some self-love. Some self-love. because you're what's going to get through this. You're what's going to get to tomorrow. You're what's going to move forward. You're what's going to have the next answer. You're the one who's going to get the next paycheck. So give yourself some self-love. Remember, it's not personal, but it is about you. This chance right here, this opportunity is about you. Like I said, the first time I just went into panic. The first time I was unemployed, I just went into pure freaking panic. But the second time I came around, I was like, I can do better. I can do better. And so I did better for me. And I went on and did things I loved. Well, guess what? I got another job and I got paid a lot for that job and all of those things. And that job was more fun and better than the one I had before. Glad I got laid off. Now, if you had asked me that day, the day I got laid off, I would have been like, oh, come on, man, I just got this job. This sucks. No severance, nothing. But by the end, oh, I was very happy about it. Very happy about it. And you can have that turn around for you too, okay? My severance agreement says I can't sue. Does that mean I should be worried? Okay, so a severance agreement question. The severance agreement. Look at what it is. 99.99% of severance agreements are going to have you waive your rights to sue about something. The question is, what is it having you waiving your rights to? Current things related to the layoff, current things related to your employment, future things that you can't only sue that employer, or things that you can't sue anybody related to anything to your employment, right? Somebody hacks your data 6 months from now at that employer. Can you sue them? Yes or no? Well, your severance agreement might prohibit that because that would be related to your employment there. So check the words. But odds are, in a severance agreement, you're waiving something that you could sue. The question is the scope of it. And that scope is negotiable, but know that it is very common and industry standard that you waive your rights to sue for anything up to and through your unemployment. Your layoff date. They want to know that you're not going to sue them for anything that's happened at your employment or the way they're letting you go. So that is very normal to waive. Anything beyond that is optional and negotiable. How do I know if the offer they're giving me is good? Okay. So I've got, I didn't, I made so many resources about this stuff. Rule of thumb. So first off, severance pay is not legally required. They do not have to give that to you at all. It is something they are choosing to do because they get a benefit. In order to sign a contract, there must be a value exchange between the parties, right? Laying you off isn't a value exchange. That doesn't benefit you, right? So they can't ask any more of you. So what do? Is they're going to ask a lot of you in your severance agreement, majority of the time, and in exchange give you some money for it. And that's the value exchange. So that money is always negotiable. It's always negotiable because the fact that they're even offering it to you means they're open to negotiation. They didn't have to offer it in the first place. Now, that being said, a lot of companies have policies. If they're laying you off because of money problems, they may not have a lot of money that they can even offer. Rule of thumb, general rule of thumb is 1 week of severance pay. So 1 week of your salary for every year you've been at the company. So if you've been at the company 8 years, it would be industry norm to pay you 8 weeks of salary. That's the general rule of thumb. Now, of course, that can change based on what they may have, what they think they can get away with, or what your job has been. The higher you are up in a company, the more leverage you have because you know more about what's going on and so on. You also have fewer jobs that you can go get. And so it's a balance exchange. So rule of thumb, how do you know if it's a good number? One, look at everything they've been paying you, right? One of the jobs I had, I was a sales rep, so I had a base salary, but then I also had commissions and bonuses and all these other things. And they're like, well, we're going to pay you 8 weeks of salary. I don't want that's 20% of what my take home was. I want 8 weeks of everything. So know that it's based on what you've had. Industry standard is 1 week for every year you work there. And I know that's harsh, right? You could work somewhere for 10 years and you get 2.5 months of severance. That's it. Bye-bye. Thanks for a decade of your life. Yeah. But do know that the severance is not a thank you. They are asking something greater in return because they're not going to start off with an equitable agreement. They know they get to take advantage of the, unfortunately,
I don't want to say they're going to take advantage of it. They know there is a strong likelihood that the loss of your job has put you into shock or panic. Exactly what we've been talking about all day, right? And so what they might do is they leverage this opportunity to give you some money, some breadcrumbs to get more out of you. And many of us get caught up in that panic. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have this call is we get caught up in the panic and we don't see the full opportunity of what's on that page. We don't see the full opportunity of this negotiation and we don't step into that. We feel ashamed, embarrassed, whatever. Fuck that. You just got laid off, an employable person who did their job. You have value. And you're not just going to give up more of your rights and what is important to you because of an inconvenient timing. You know you're going to get some severance. You know you have unemployment available to you. Let that bring you some peace of mind and space to breathe. And that's usually why many states require they give you some window of time to review the severance agreement. They can't make you sign it on the day of or anything like that. That's required because they know you're going to be in emotional shock and they don't want your employer to take advantage of that. Okay. I do have my severance studio program if any of you need that. It walks you through all the 4 main areas of a severance agreement from your perspective as the employee. What's negotiable, what's not, what do you do, all of that type of stuff, what to look out for. And of course, what I would do if I ever had that happen to me again. But everything I've ever learned or known about severance agreements is in that, but without the legal nonsense, right, for you as an employee. All right, all. Thank you for hearing me out. Like I said, what to negotiate in your severance agreement is going to get moved to Tuesday. Today was about the power of reframing. Know that there is that free exercise for you if you ever want it or need it. It is at ceolegalcoach.com/layoff-opportunity. I will, you know what, let me just put that in the chat right now. That wasn't there. Okay, here we go. So there, I just put the link in the chat. So if you want to grab that, just a quick little download. Like I said, it gives you, helps you expand your horizons, ways to look at your layoff in a positive, empowering way. And then I gave you 20 ways that I would, take advantage of this situation in fun, amazing, life-enhancing ways. And then I use it to show you how you can find 20 other ways that the universe could give you $20,000. Because a paycheck is not the only way to get money. Might be the only way you're used to, might be the habit you have, but a paycheck through an employer is not the only way to get money. And so let it expand your horizons on that as well. All right, I'll have a great weekend. I will see you on Tuesday.